Hello everyone, welcome back. This is a story from Her Silent Revenge, and it has taken a turn you absolutely didn't expect. Let's begin.
When I returned from my business trip and arrived at my own hotel, an employee live-streamed herself throwing coffee on me and declared, "The CEO is my husband." I didn't panic. I just smiled and called the CEO she'd just mentioned, "Come meet your new wife." His face went pale when he saw me. That was the moment their lives changed forever. I'm incredibly grateful you're here with me today. If this opening caught your attention, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love connecting with all of you. Before we dive in, please note this story blends some fictional elements for entertainment and educational value. Any similarities to actual names or places are purely coincidental. However, the lessons I'm sharing could genuinely resonate with your own experiences. Let's begin. The moment I stepped off that plane, I knew something was wrong. 6 weeks away had been too long enough for secrets to fester, long enough for betrayal to take root. The air inside the terminal hit me first. That recycled metallic smell mixed with coffee and cleaning solution. But underneath it, I caught the humid weight of a Sterling Falls summer afternoon pressing through the automatic doors. Home. Or what used to feel like home. I pulled my carry-on behind me, its wheels clicking against the polished floor. My navy blazer felt wrinkled after 14 hours in business class, and a headache was forming behind my eyes. Dubai to New York to Sterling Falls. 2 flights, 3 time zones, and a growing sense of dread I couldn't quite name. The baggage claim was mercifully quick. I spotted my black Toomey suitcase on the second rotation and pulled it off myself, waving away the porter. My father had taught me that never let people do for you what you can do for yourself. Independence isn't just about money or power. It's about never being caught helpless. God, I missed him. 3 years gone, and some days the absence still felt fresh. Tom Jenkins was waiting by the exit, holding a simple card with my name on it. No company logo, no fanfare. Exactly as I'd requested. Tom had been driving for the Sterling Grand since before I was born. His weathered face broke into a smile when he saw me. "Miss Morgan, welcome home." "Thanks, Tom. It's good to be back." The lie came easily. He took my suitcase and led me to the black sedan. The leather seats were cool from the air conditioning, a welcome relief. As Tom pulled into traffic, I let my head fall back and closed my eyes. 6 weeks in Dubai negotiating the purchase of $3.5 million worth of state-of-the-art hotel equipment. New commercial kitchen systems, upgraded HVAC for all 20 floors, complete conference center renovation. The kind of deal that required my personal attention, my father's name still carrying weight in international business circles that my husband's never would. My husband. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through missed messages. 17 from Claire, my executive assistant. 12 from Nicholas. Nothing from Jonathan. That should have been my first real clue. But I'd grown so accustomed to his distance over the past year that his silence barely registered. Work trips that ran long, late nights at the office. That subtle pulling away that happens so gradually, you don't notice until you're standing on opposite sides of a canyon you don't remember digging. I typed out a quick message to Claire. "I'm back. Don't tell Jonathan. I want to check the hotel first." Her response came within seconds. "Understood, Ms. Morgan." Through the window, Sterling Falls unfolded in familiar ribbons of tree-lined streets and brick buildings. The Sterling Grand was my father's crown jewel, 20 stories of glass and steel, rising from what used to be an abandoned warehouse district, now the most sought-after address in the city. It was mine now, 65% controlling stake, enough to make every decision that mattered. Enough to feel the weight of my father's expectations pressing down every single day. "How are Lily and Benjamin?" Tom asked, catching my eye in the rearview mirror. The mention of my children made my chest tighten. Growing like weeds. Lily's reading at a 7th grade level now, and Benjamin just lost his first tooth. I smiled despite myself. "Mrs. Cartwright sent me photos, but it's not the same as being there." "They'll be excited to see you." "I hope so." 6 weeks was a long time in a child's life. My phone buzzed. Nicholas. "Heard you landed. Welcome back. Coffee tomorrow." Nicholas Foster. My best friend since business school, the one person who'd never wanted anything from me except my friendship. He joined Sterling Grand as director of operations 5 years ago, running day-to-day operations with precision that would have made my father proud. If I was honest with myself, Nicholas should have been CEO. He had the skills, the vision, the respect. But I'd given that position to my husband instead, believing that family came first, that marriage meant sacrifice. Now I wondered what else I'd sacrificed without realizing it. Tomorrow sounds good, I typed back. 10 a.m. Perfect. I've got updates you'll want to hear. Something in that message made my stomach clench. Updates. Not good news. Updates. The sedan turned onto Grand Avenue, and suddenly we were there. The Sterling Grand rose up before us, all gleaming glass and modern architecture. The late afternoon sun caught the windows and turned them into sheets of gold. Beautiful. Powerful. Mine. I should have felt pride. Instead, I felt that creeping dread intensify into something sharper. Miss Morgan. Tom glanced back. Should I take you to the executive entrance? I opened my mouth to say yes. That's what I always did, slip in through the private entrance. Take the executive elevator straight to my office on the 20th floor. Avoid the chaos of the main lobby. But something stopped me. That instinct my father had taught me to trust the one that had guided me through 1,000 business negotiations. No, I heard myself say. Main entrance, please. Tom's eyebrows rose slightly, but he didn't question it. The car pulled up to the grand entrance. Through the glass, I could see the lobby, our signature marble floors, the soaring atrium, the elegant Venetian chandelier. I could also see something else. A splash of red near the concierge desk, movement that seemed too agitated, too sharp for the usual smooth operation of a 5-star hotel. And then I saw him. Harold Thompson, our head concierge, a man who'd worked for my father since the beginning. His face was turned towards someone I couldn't quite see, and his expression, that was when I knew I'd been right to come here first. Tom opened my door and I stepped out onto the sidewalk. The heat hit me like a wall, but I barely noticed. As I approached the revolving doors, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A flash of red, a voice raised in anger, and Harold Thompson's weary face turned towards someone I couldn't yet see. Something was very, very wrong. I should have gone straight to the executive elevator. I should have called Jonathan from my office. But something pulled me toward that chaos, call it instinct, call it fate. Whatever it was, it led me to the moment that changed everything. The lobby of Sterling Grand stretched before me like a cathedral of marble and light. Afternoon sun slanted through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting geometric patterns across the polished stone floors. The familiar scent of white orchids, my father's signature touch, mingled with the faint hum of controlled elegance that had defined this hotel for 3 generations. Guests moved through the space with the easy confidence of people accustomed to luxury. Their voices a low murmur beneath the tinkling fountain at the center of the room. But that carefully curated harmony was fracturing. My eyes found Nicholas first. He was kneeling beside an elderly guest who'd collapsed near the concierge desk, his dress shirt darkened with sweat. His hand steady on the man's shoulder as he spoke in low, reassuring tones. A small crowd had gathered, but Nicholas waved them back with calm authority, asking someone to bring water and a chair. His face held that expression I'd known since business school, total, focus the kind that shut out everything except the person who needed him. My chest tightened with something I couldn't quite name. Gratitude, maybe, or relief that in my absence at least one person had held the line. Then I heard the other voice. Are you kidding me right now? Do you have any idea how long I've been standing here? The words sliced through the lobby's hush like nails on glass. My gaze snapped to the concierge desk where a young woman in a skin-tight red dress stood with one hand on her hip and the other clutching her phone. The dress was more suited to a nightclub than a professional hotel lobby, certainly not appropriate for a weekday afternoon shift. Her makeup was flawless but heavy, her blonde hair falling in calculated waves over bare shoulders. She looked about 22, maybe younger, and she was practically vibrating with indignation. In front of her stood Harold Thompson. Harold, 68 years old, a fixture at Sterling Grand since before I was born, the man who taught me how to fold a pocket square when I was 7, the man who remembered every guest's name, every preference, every anniversary. And this girl, this child, was tearing into him like he was dirt beneath her designer heels. "You left my car in the sun?" she snapped, waving her phone for emphasis. "My leather seats are probably ruined. Do you know how much that car cost? Do you—" Harold's face was ashen, but his posture remained dignified. "Miss Mitchell, I apologize for any inconvenience. The valet area was full when you arrived, and we had to—" "I don't care about your excuses," Amber cut him off. Her voice rose sharp enough to turn heads. "You're slow, you're incompetent, and honestly, I don't understand how someone like you still has a job at a 5-star hotel." The words landed like a slap. I felt my jaw tighten, my fingers curling around the handle of my suitcase. Across the lobby, Nicholas was still focused on the elderly guest, oblivious to the spectacle unfolding 20 feet away. The other staff members hovered uncertainly, clearly unsure whether to intervene. A few guests had paused mid-stride, watching with the uncomfortable fascination of people who knew they were witnessing something ugly but couldn't look away. And then Amber did something that made my blood run cold. She lifted her phone, angled it toward her face, and smiled. "Hey everyone, Amber here." Her voice transformed instantly bright, bubbly, dripping with fake sweetness. "So I'm at work right now, and let me just say, the service today has been less than stellar." She rolled her eyes, dramatically panning the camera toward Harold, who stood frozen in humiliation. "I mean, I love you guys, but dealing with incompetent staff is just exhausting, you know? Anyway, stay positive and stay gorgeous, because that's what we do." She blew a kiss at the camera, but kept the phone raised, still recording. I'd seen enough. My heels clicked against the marble as I crossed the lobby, each step deliberate. The rolling suitcase trailed behind me, and I was acutely aware of my wrinkled blazer, my travel-weary face, the weight of 6 weeks pressing down on my shoulders. But none of that mattered, not when one of my people was being humiliated in his own workplace. "Excuse me," I said, my voice calm but firm. Amber glanced up, her expression shifting from annoyance to disdain in the span of a heartbeat. She looked me up and down, taking in my navy blazer, my simple black slacks, my lack of flashy jewelry. I watched her dismiss me in real time. The phone in her hand tilted slightly, capturing me in frame. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone making it clear she had no intention of helping anyone. "Actually, I think you can," I replied evenly. "This is a place of business, not a stage for personal drama. You came to work late, you're dressed inappropriately for a professional environment, and you're currently disrespecting a senior staff member who has served this hotel with integrity for over 30 years. Amber's eyes narrowed. "I'm sorry, who are you exactly?" "Someone who understands that respect is earned through actions, not Instagram followers," I said. "And right now, your actions are unacceptable." Her face flushed, not with embarrassment, but with rage. She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a hiss, but the phone never wavered. "You need to mind your own business, lady. I don't know who you think you are, but you look like some bitter middle-aged woman who has nothing better to do than lecture people half her age." The words should have stung. Maybe they would have if I'd been someone else. But I wasn't someone else. I was Sienna Morgan. And I'd spent the last 6 weeks negotiating a $3.5 million deal with suppliers who tried to lowball me at every turn. I'd fought for every percentage point, every clause, every delivery date. This child with her phone and her red dress and her performative cruelty didn't even register on the scale of challenges I'd faced. I opened my mouth to respond calmly, professionally, the way my father had taught me. But before I could speak, Amber made her next move. She pivoted sharply, phone still clutched in one hand as if to storm away. Her shoulder collided with mine. Hard. Too hard to be accidental. The coffee cup in her other hand, I hadn't even noticed she'd been holding it tipped forward, and suddenly the world moved in slow motion. Dark liquid arced through the air, catching the afternoon light. I watched it, almost hypnotized, as it splashed across the front of my blazer. The navy fabric darkened instantly, the stain spreading like ink bleeding into cloth. My father's blazer, the one he'd given me on my 30th birthday 3 months before the heart attack that took him from us. The one I'd worn to every major negotiation since, like armor, like a promise. I looked down at the stain, then up at Amber's face. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't even pretending to be sorry. Instead, her lips curved into the smallest, most triumphant smile I'd ever seen. Her phone was still raised, still recording, capturing every second. "Oops," she said, her voice flat. "My bad." The coffee burned through my blazer, the blazer my father had given me on my 30th birthday, spreading across the fabric like a stain that would never come out. For one heartbeat, I couldn't breathe. Then I looked up at this girl, her phone still recording, and something inside me shifted from shock to absolute clarity. The lobby hadn't gone silent. That would have been too dramatic. Instead, conversation stuttered and died in patches, like lights flickering out. I felt the weight of a dozen gazes. Phones lifted. A woman near the fountain whispered to her companion. A businessman paused mid-stride, watching. Amber's smile widened. "Oh my God," she gasped into her phone, her voice pitching higher, the camera still trained on her face. "You guys, you won't believe what just happened. This crazy woman just attacked me. She pushed me and now my dress is ruined." She angled the camera toward me, and I saw myself through her lens, blazer-stained jaw tight, standing perfectly still. Then she flipped it back to her own face, eyes wide and glistening with crocodile tears. "I was just trying to do my job and she came at me for no reason. This is assault. You're all witnessing this." Except the video would show exactly what happened. I hadn't moved. She'd collided with me, spilled her coffee, and now she was performing for an audience that stretched far beyond this lobby. I should have felt angry or humiliated, but all I felt was cold, crystalline focus. I reached into my bag and pulled out a handkerchief linen, monogrammed, another gift from my father. I pressed it gently against the stain, needing a moment to think, to observe. And as I looked at Amber's face, really looked, something tugged at the edge of my consciousness. Her eyes, sharp glittering green, the shape of her jaw angular and strong, the way her chin tilted when she smiled just slightly to the left. I knew that tilt. I'd seen it in mirrors, in old photographs, in my father's face when he was about to win a negotiation. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the coffee soaking through my blouse. No, it couldn't be. I pushed the thought away, locked it down. I couldn't afford to get distracted by shadows and half-formed suspicions, not when this girl was still talking. "You'd better apologize right now," Amber said, finally lowering her phone, but keeping it recording at her side. Her voice dropped, losing the performative sweetness. "And you're going to pay for this dress. Do you know who I am?" "I know exactly who you are," I said quietly. "You're an employee of this hotel who's currently violating dress code, professional conduct standards, and basic human decency." Her face flushed. "You don't get to talk to me like that. Do you know who my fiancé is?" There it was, the card she'd been waiting to play. "Enlighten me," I said. She stepped closer. "Jonathan Prescott, CEO of this entire hotel. He runs this place, which means he can fire anyone he wants, including bitter old women who don't know when to mind their own business." Jonathan, my husband's name in this girl's mouth, felt obscene. I didn't flinch. I just watched her the way you'd watch a snake coiling to strike. "Jonathan Prescott," I repeated slowly. "Your fiancé." "That's right." She crossed her arms, phone dangling from one hand. "So maybe you should think twice before you start running your mouth. Touch me again and you'll be out on the street before you can pack your sad little office." Behind her, I saw Nicholas moving through the crowd. He reached us in 6 long strides, his expression calm but firm. "Miss Mitchell, you're in violation of multiple employee policies. You need to—" "Oh, here we go," Amber interrupted, rolling her eyes. She lifted her phone again, capturing Nicholas. "Nicholas Foster, everyone. The guy who thinks he's so important because he kisses up to management. Newsflash, Nicholas Jonathan's the one with the real power around here, and he's going to be my husband. So unless you want to find yourself looking for a new job, I suggest you back off." Nicholas didn't rise to the bait. He simply turned to me, his voice gentle. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I said, and I meant it. The shock had burned away, leaving only ice-cold determination. Nicholas positioned himself slightly between us. "This needs to stop now. Miss Mitchell, you need to clock out and go home." "I'm not going anywhere," Amber snapped, still filming. And you don't have the authority to send me home. Only Jonathan does. Actually, I said, my voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Let's ask Jonathan. Both of them turned to look at me. I pulled my phone from my bag, the movement slow and deliberate. The lobby had gone quieter now, spectators sensing something significant was about to happen. I scrolled to Jonathan's name and pressed call. The phone rang once, twice. Amber's confidence flickered just for a second, but her phone stayed up. Then Jonathan's voice filled the space between us, smooth and unsuspecting. Sienna, honey, I wasn't expecting you back until tomorrow. Is everything okay? I cut him off, my voice calm and cold as winter. You need to come down to the main lobby, right now. There's someone here who says she's your fiancé. She just threw coffee on me, and I think it's time we had a family discussion about your living arrangements. Silence on the other end. Not the silence of confusion, the silence of a man whose world had just detonated. Sienna, Main lobby, I repeated. You have 5 minutes. I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my bag. Amber's face had gone white. Her phone wavered in her hand. You're Sienna Morgan. Nicholas said quietly, his eyes never leaving Amber's face. Chairwoman of Sterling Grand Hotels, majority shareholder, Jonathan Prescott's wife of 12 years. The blood drained from Amber's face so fast I thought she might faint. Her phone dropped to her side, the live stream forgotten. Around us, the crowd stirred. Phones lifted higher. I heard someone whisper, "Oh my God, that's her." I looked at Amber, at her red dress and her perfect makeup, and her phone still clutched in her trembling hand. 5 minutes, I said softly. I suggest you use them to decide whether you want to keep digging this hole or start climbing out. Then I turned to Nicholas. How's the guest you were helping? Stable, he said. Dehydrated but recovering. Good. I touched his arm briefly, a gesture of gratitude. Thank you for being here. His eyes held mine for a moment, and I saw something there I couldn't quite name. Concern, loyalty, something deeper. The elevator across the lobby chimed. Everyone turned. The doors slid open, and Jonathan Prescott stepped into view, his face pale, and his eyes searching the crowd, until they landed on me, on my stained blazer, on Amber standing 3 feet away, on the dozen phones pointed in his direction. He looked for the first time in our 12-year marriage genuinely terrified. The silence on the other end of the line lasted exactly 3 seconds, 3 seconds in which I heard Jonathan's entire world begin to collapse. A sharp intake of breath, the scrape of a chair against flooring, muffled voices asking if everything was all right. Then the line went dead. I lowered the phone, slowly slipping it back into my bag with steady hands. Around me, the lobby had transformed into something between a theater and a courtroom. Guests clustered in small groups, phones raised, whispering with the electric energy of people who sensed they were witnessing something significant. Hotel staff hovered at the edges, uncertain whether to intervene or bear witness. 5 minutes. I'd given Jonathan 5 minutes to get down here, and now those 5 minutes stretched before me like an ocean I had to cross without drowning. The wine stain on my blazer had begun to dry the fabric, stiffening against my skin. I could feel it with every breath, a physical reminder of how quickly things could fall apart, how a single moment could tear open everything you thought you knew. I stood perfectly still, my spine straight, my face composed. But inside, I was falling through 12 years of memories like Alice down the rabbit hole. Our wedding day. Jonathan in his tuxedo at the altar, his eyes bright with what I'd believed was love. My father walking me down the aisle, squeezing my hand. He'll take care of you, Dad had whispered. Our 5th anniversary. Jonathan surprising me with a weekend in Charleston, talking about the children we'd have someday. Lily had been born 8 months later. Benjamin came 2 years after that. The late nights. At first I'd thought nothing of them. He was CEO after all. But the late nights had turned into overnight trips, then weekend conferences, then business dinners lasting until 2 in the morning. I'd asked him once, maybe 3 years ago, if everything was okay between us. Of course, he'd said, kissing my forehead with casual affection. I'm just stressed about the quarterly reports. You understand? And I'd believed him. Because what was the alternative? Miss Morgan. The voice pulled me back. I turned to find Nicholas standing beside me, holding out a bottle of water. His eyes were dark with concern. "Thank you," I said, taking the water. My throat was dry. He moved closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "I'm right here, whatever you need." I looked at him, really looked. Nicholas Foster. We'd met in business school 15 years ago, two ambitious kids trying to prove we belonged in a world of inherited wealth. He'd been the only person who didn't treat me like Robert Morgan's daughter, just Sienna. When Dad died and I'd inherited the controlling stake in Sterling Grand, I'd asked Nicholas to come aboard as director of operations. Jonathan had been furious, said it looked like I didn't trust my own husband. But I'd held firm, because Nicholas had something Jonathan never would: integrity that couldn't be bought or sold. "I know," I said quietly. And I did. I'd always known. Nicholas adjusted the tablet he'd been carrying. "I have some documents," he said carefully, "if you need them." Documents. Something cold and sharp settled in my chest. "Later," I said as after. He nodded and stepped back, positioning himself slightly behind my right shoulder. A silent guardian. Across from us, Amber Mitchell looked like she was coming apart at the seams. Her perfect makeup had started to smudge under her eyes. She'd tried calling Jonathan 3 times, stabbing at her phone with increasing desperation, but he wasn't picking up. Smart man, or maybe just a coward. "This is insane," she muttered loud enough for me to hear. "He'll explain everything. He loves me. He's going to marry me." I didn't respond. She was a child playing dress-up in a world she didn't understand, and in a few minutes, reality was going to hit her like a freight train. The crowd was growing. A businessman murmured to his colleague, "Wait, isn't that Sienna Morgan, the chairwoman?" His friend pulled out his phone. "Holy shit, it is. Her family owns like 60% of this place. That girl just threw wine on the chairwoman and claimed she's engaged to Morgan's husband. Somebody's getting fired." The whispers spread like wildfire. I felt the shift in the room's energy, the way people's gazes moved from curious to awed to sympathetic. They were beginning to understand what they were watching, not a petty dispute between strangers, but the public unraveling of a marriage, a betrayal, a reckoning. I unscrewed the cap on the water bottle and took a small sip. The liquid was cold and clean, grounding me in this moment. I couldn't afford to drift. Couldn't afford to feel. Not yet. Harold caught my eye from across the lobby. He gave me the smallest nod, a gesture of solidarity that meant more than he could know. Behind him, I saw Claire Peterson slip through the crowd, her face pale with shock. Our eyes met, and I shook my head slightly. "Not now. Stay back." She understood. Claire always understood. The clock above the concierge desk read 4:38. 2 minutes left. I let myself wonder where Jonathan had been when I'd called. His office was on the 12th floor. Should have been here by now. Unless he'd been somewhere else. Somewhere he wasn't supposed to be. With someone he wasn't supposed to be with. The thought didn't hurt as much as I expected. Maybe because part of me had known deep down for a very long time. I just hadn't wanted to see it. Amber was pacing now, her red heels clicking frantically against the marble. "Where is he?" she demanded. "He said he'd come. He always comes when I need him." I almost pitied her. Almost. 4:39. The air in the lobby felt thick, oppressive, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. My blazer stuck to my back. My feet ached in my heels. I was exhausted down to my bones, jet-lagged and heartsick, and so tired of pretending. But I didn't sit down, didn't move, didn't show weakness. Because that's what my father had taught me in business, in life, in war: never let them see you bleed. 4:40. And then, like fate arriving right on schedule, the elevator chimed. The sound cut through the murmuring crowd like a knife through silk. Every head turned, every phone lifted higher. The doors slid open with a soft mechanical whisper. And there he was, my husband of 12 years. Jonathan Prescott looked like he'd been running. His tie was loosened, the knot pulled down to mid-chest. His hair, usually meticulously styled, was disheveled. Sweat beaded on his forehead and upper lip. His shirt, the pale blue one I'd bought him for his birthday last year, was wrinkled, the top 2 buttons undone. But it was his face that told me everything I needed to know. Pure, unfiltered horror. Not confusion, not surprise. Not the face of an innocent man about to clear up a misunderstanding. The face of a man whose secrets had just dragged him into the light, kicking and screaming. Our eyes met across the lobby, and for the first time in 12 years, I saw my husband for exactly what he was. Jonathan moved toward me, not toward Amber, not to explain, but toward me, his hands reaching out as if physical force could stop what had already been set in motion. And in that single moment of panic in his eyes, I saw confirmation of every terrible suspicion I'd carried for the past 6 weeks. "Sienna," he said, his voice rough and breathless. "Honey, what are you doing here? I thought you weren't coming back until tomorrow. This isn't what it looks like. Let's go upstairs, talk privately." "Isn't what it looks like," I repeated, my voice calm, too calm. The kind of calm that comes when your heart is breaking, but your mind has gone cold and sharp. "Your fiancée just told me you two are engaged. She threw coffee on me and threatened to have you fire me. So tell me, Jonathan, which part am I misunderstanding?" His face went pale. "Fiancée Sienna, I don't know what she told you, but..." Before he could finish, Amber launched herself at him. "Jonathan, baby, tell this woman to leave us alone." She sobbed, wrapping her arms around his waist. "She attacked me. She's trying to ruin everything." Jonathan stood frozen. He didn't push her away, but he didn't hold her either. He just stood there, arms at his sides like a mannequin caught between two displays. The paralysis of a man whose lies had just collided in spectacular fashion. The lobby was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. "Jonathan," I said softly, "she's waiting for you to hold her. Your fiancé is waiting for you to protect her." His jaw worked. Sweat trickled down his temple. "Sienna, you have to understand." "I understand perfectly," I said. "I understand that I've been gone for 6 weeks working to secure a $3.5 million equipment deal that will modernize our flagship hotel. I understand that while I was doing that, you were here. With her." I gestured toward Amber, who was still clinging to him. "What I don't understand is why you're standing there like a coward instead of owning what you've done." Something in his face shifted. The fear flickered, then hardened into something uglier. Defense. Aggression. "You were never here, Sienna." The words exploded out of him loud enough to make several people in the crowd flinch. 6 weeks you were gone. 6 weeks. Always choosing work over family. Over us. What did you expect me to do? Sit alone in an empty house while you build your empire? You chose your father's legacy over our marriage. Don't act surprised when I choose someone who actually cares about me. The lobby seemed to hold its breath. I felt Nicholas shift slightly behind me, felt the protective tension in his stance. But I didn't need protection. Not from words. "Is that what you're going with?" I asked quietly. "You're going to make this my fault because I honored a business commitment, because I ran the company. My father built the company that pays your salary, funds your lifestyle, and gave you the title you wave around like a weapon." "I didn't ask to be CEO of my wife's family business," Jonathan shot back. "Do you know what it's like, everyone knowing I'm only here because I married you, that I'll never be anything more than Robert Morgan's son-in-law? So you decided to steal from us instead." The words were out before I could stop them cold and precise. "Did that make you feel powerful, Jonathan, embezzling from the company? Or was that Amber's idea?" His face went sheet white. "What are you talking about?" "Don't." I took a step forward. "Don't insult me by pretending you don't know what I'm talking about. You think I went to Dubai just to negotiate? You think I didn't notice the discrepancies in our accounts, the shell companies, the transfers?" Amber had gone very still against Jonathan's chest. Her tear-streaked face tilted up to look at him. "Jonathan, what is she talking about?" Jonathan's eyes darted around the lobby at the phones recording, at the crowd, watching at Nicholas standing behind me with that damning tablet. He was calculating, weighing his options, looking for an exit that didn't exist. And then he made his choice. He shoved Amber away, not gently, not carefully. He grabbed her shoulders and pushed her hard enough that she stumbled backward, her heels skidding on the marble. The crowd gasped. "I don't know this woman," Jonathan shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "She's delusional. She's been stalking me for months." I tried to be professional. Tried to let HR handle it, but she won't leave me alone. Amber's face collapsed. Jonathan, what are you? She means nothing to me. Jonathan continued talking over her, his eyes locked on mine. Nothing, Sienna. She's a junior employee who got obsessed. I was trying to handle it quietly, but now you see what I've been dealing with. This is why I've been stressed, why I've been working late. I was trying to protect you from this harassment. I watched Amber's face, watched the moment she realized what was happening, that the man she'd believed loved her, the man she'd defended and clung to was throwing her away like garbage to save himself. You're lying, Amber whispered. Jonathan, tell them the truth. Tell them about us, about the apartment, about... There is no us, Jonathan snapped. You need psychiatric help, Miss Mitchell, and you're fired effective immediately. Amber reeled back as if he'd slapped her. Tears streamed down her face, genuine this time. You said you loved me. You said, I said nothing. Jonathan cut her off. He turned back to me, his expression shifting to something meant to look pleading. Sienna, please, you have to believe me. I would never... Stop. The single word cut through his rambling like a blade. I looked at my husband of 12 years, this man who'd stood beside me at my father's funeral, who'd held our children the day they were born, who'd promised to honor and cherish me, and I saw him clearly for the first time. Not the man I'd married, not the partner I'd believed in. A coward, a thief, a liar willing to destroy anyone to save himself. I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. You want to blame me, Jonathan. You want to make this about my choices, about my absence. Let me show you what accountability actually looks like. I turned to Nicholas. The documents, please. Nicholas stepped forward, tablet in hand, his face expressionless, but his eyes holding something that looked like grim satisfaction. Jonathan's face went from pale to gray. Sienna, wait. 12 years, I said softly, looking at him one last time. I gave you 12 years, 2 children, and the benefit of the doubt. You gave me coffee stains and embezzlement. I think we both know who made the better investment. Then I took the tablet from Nicholas and turned to face the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, my voice carrying across the silent lobby, thank you for your patience. I apologize for the disruption to your afternoon. But since this has become so public, I think transparency is appropriate. I looked directly at one of the phones recording us. My name is Sienna Morgan. I'm the chairwoman and majority shareholder of Sterling Grand Hotels, and I'd like to show you what my husband has been doing while I was away on business. I turned to Nicholas, my voice calm and clear enough to carry across the lobby. Call security. Have them clear the lobby and escort Miss Mitchell to a VIP waiting room. This conversation needs to happen somewhere more appropriate. Then I looked at Jonathan. You have 2 choices. Come with me to the executive conference room, or security will escort you out of this building permanently. Choose now. Jonathan's mouth opened and closed. For a moment, I thought he might refuse, but survival instinct won out. Fine, he said, his voice hoarse. But Sienna, you have to listen to me. Save it, I said. You'll have plenty of time to explain upstairs. Nicholas had already pulled out his phone. Within seconds, 2 security guards appeared, Mike Stevens and Tom Warren, both men I'd hired personally. Miss Mitchell needs to be escorted to the VIP lounge on the 2nd floor, Nicholas told them. She's not to leave the building or contact anyone. Understood? Yes, sir, Mike said, moving toward Amber. Amber's head snapped up, her tear-streaked face suddenly alert. What? No, you can't do this. This is illegal detention. She lifted her phone again. Everyone, are you seeing this? They're silencing me. Miss Mitchell. Mike said gently but firmly, please come with us. No, Jonathan, tell them. Tell them we're together. Tell them you love me. Jonathan said nothing. He stared at the floor, jaw clenched. Amber's face crumpled. But even through her tears, she kept filming. This is what the rich do. They destroy people like me. Tom stepped forward. Ma'am, you can walk with us voluntarily, or we can call the police. Your choice. The fight drained out of her. She let Mike guide her toward the elevator, but she kept her phone up, her voice echoing across the lobby. Remember this. Remember what you saw here. Then the elevator doors closed and she was gone. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, raising my voice. I apologize for the disruption. Sterling Grand values your privacy and comfort. This is an internal personnel matter that will be handled appropriately. The crowd began to disperse slowly, reluctantly, but the phone stayed out. The videos would be online within minutes. Good, let them watch. Conference room, I said to Jonathan. Now! We moved through the lobby in silence. Me in front, Jonathan in the middle, Nicholas bringing up the rear. We took the executive elevator straight to the top floor. The ride up was suffocating. Jonathan kept opening his mouth like he wanted to speak, then closing it again. I stood perfectly still, watching the floor numbers climb. The doors opened onto the 12th floor. The conference room was at the end of the hall, a massive space with a table that could seat 20. I pushed open the double doors and walked to the head of the table. My seat, the chairwoman's seat. Jonathan hesitated in the doorway. Sit, I said. He sat. Nicholas closed the doors and took up position near the window tablet in hand. For a long moment, no one spoke. I let the silence press down on Jonathan until I could see him squirming. Sienna, he finally said, his voice cracking. Please, let me explain. That girl Amber, she's unstable. She's been stalking me for months. I never touched her. She made all of it up. Stop lying, Jonathan. The words cut through his rambling like a knife. He flinched. I know everything, I said quietly. Before I left for Dubai 6 weeks ago, I noticed some irregularities in our accounts. Small things. At first, I thought it was a clerical error. But then I started looking closer. Jonathan's face had gone gray. Sienna, so I did something you didn't expect, I continued. I created a test, a legitimate business opportunity worth $3.5 million. I gave you full signing authority while I was gone, knowing that if you were the man I thought I married, you'd handle it properly. I leaned forward. But if you were the man I feared you'd become, you'd see it as an opportunity. Jonathan's hands were shaking. You set me up. No, Jonathan. I said, my voice cold. I gave you a choice, and you chose to steal. He staggered backward, gripping the edge of the table. I don't know what you're talking about. For what? I stood moving around the table toward him. For the luxury condo you bought in Amber Mitchell's name. For the offshore account you thought I'd never find. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Let me show you, I said, nodding to Nicholas, exactly how deep a hole you dug for yourself. Nicholas placed the tablet on the table and tapped the screen. Security footage began to play. Jonathan and Amber in the parking garage. Then in a restaurant downtown, Jonathan reaching across the table to take her hand. Another clip, Jonathan kissing her outside a jewelry store. Jonathan's face drained of all color. Where did you get those? I'm the chairwoman, I said simply. I have access to everything. Nicholas swiped to the next screen. Bank statements. Rows of numbers transactions highlighted in red. Transfers to shell companies. An offshore account with Jonathan's name buried in the paperwork. And there, $3,500,000, approved by Jonathan Prescott, disappeared into accounts that led to a condo, to a car, to a life he was building with someone else funded by money he'd stolen from me. You authorized the transfer, I said. You created false documentation. You embezzled $3.5 million from this company, from me. Jonathan sank into his chair, his head in his hands. Sienna, please, I was going to pay it back. But you did, I said quietly. You hurt me. You betrayed me. You stole from me. And worst of all, you made me doubt myself. I took a step back. 12 years, Jonathan. We had 12 years, and you traded it all for what a girl half your age and stolen money. He had no answer. I looked at Nicholas. Is Edward on his way? He'll be here in 10 minutes, Nicholas said, along with Howard Blackwell and the rest of the board. Jonathan's head jerked up. The board, Sienna, no, please, we don't need to involve. You made it everyone's business the moment you stole from this company, I said. Now you get to face the consequences. The conference room doors opened and Edward Stratton walked in, carrying 2 file boxes. Behind him came Howard Blackwell. His silver hair immaculately combed, his expression skeptical. The emergency board meeting I'd called was about to begin. Howard's eyes found mine first, then flicked to Jonathan. Sienna, this better be worth pulling me out of dinner with the mayor. It is, I said. Just please sit. Patricia Sinclair arrived next, followed by Robert Caldwell, our CFO liaison, then Jennifer Hayes, who specialized in corporate governance. They took their seats, exchanging confused glances. Edward set the boxes down and began unpacking documents, spreading them across the table with precision. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, I began. What I'm about to present is evidence of systematic financial misconduct by our CEO over the past 6 months. Jonathan's head snapped up. This is absurd. Sienna's trying to... You'll have your chance to respond, I said calmly, after we review the evidence. Edward pulled up the first document on the large screen. Bank statements, rows of transactions with specific ones highlighted in red. These are transfers from our operational accounts, Edward explained, beginning 6 months ago and accelerating during Mrs. Morgan's absence. The total embezzled amount is $3,500,000. All transactions were authorized by CEO Jonathan Prescott. Howard leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Jonathan, what the hell is this? It's a setup. Jonathan burst out, his face flushed. This is Sienna manipulating everything to frame me because she wants total control. She's been absent for years, and now she's come back trying to destroy me out of jealousy. She's just like her father, ruthless and willing to crush anyone who threatens her power. The words hung in the air like poison. Howard's expression darkened. Careful, Jonathan. You're talking about Robert Morgan, a man who gave you everything. Did he, Jonathan laughed bitterly, or did he give me a gilded cage, made me CEO in name only, while everyone knew I was just the son-in-law keeping the seat warm? If you felt that way, Patricia said coldly, you should have resigned, not stolen from us. I didn't steal anything, Jonathan insisted. These are fabricated documents. Sienna's been planning this for months. She set me up. Actually, I said quietly, I did. I set up a test. The room went silent. 6 weeks ago, I noticed irregularities in our accounts. I continued. So I created a legitimate business opportunity, a $3.5 million equipment deal. I gave Jonathan full authority to handle it while I was gone. I looked directly at him. If he was honest, he'd process it correctly. If he was corrupt, he'd see it as an opportunity to steal. He chose to steal. Edward clicked to the next slide. Here's where the money went. $850,000 for a luxury condo in the name of Amber Mitchell. $120,000 for a vehicle. $200,000 in designer goods and jewelry. The remaining $2.33 million is still being traced through offshore accounts. Robert Caldwell shook his head. Jonathan, these are your authorizations, your digital signature, your access codes, which could have been forged, Jonathan insisted. Shall we talk about the woman in the lobby then? I asked. Amber Mitchell, the one you claimed was a stalker. Nicholas stepped forward, holding his tablet. He placed a document on the table. A birth certificate. Lucas Prescott, born 5 years ago. Mother Jennifer Walsh, deceased 2 years ago. Father Jonathan Prescott. The air in the room turned to ice. Jonathan's face drained of color. That's not... Nicholas laid down more papers. Photos. Jonathan with a woman visibly pregnant. Jonathan holding a newborn. More recent photos, a little boy with Jonathan's eyes, Jonathan's chin. Jennifer Walsh died of complications from pneumonia, Nicholas said quietly. She left behind a son. Lucas is currently in foster care. You've never paid child support, never visited, never acknowledged his existence. Jennifer Hayes pressed her hand to her mouth. Oh my God! Howard stared at Jonathan like he'd never seen him before. You have a son. A 5-year-old son you abandoned. It wasn't like that, Jonathan stammered. Jennifer, she was a mistake. She's dead, Jonathan. I said, my voice hard. She can't say anything, but her son is alive, and you left him in the system while you spent stolen money on another mistress. Patricia stood abruptly. I've heard enough. I moved to terminate Jonathan Prescott's position as CEO effective immediately. Seconded, Robert said without hesitation. Howard looked at me, his expression pained. Sienna, are you certain about this? I've never been more certain of anything in my life, I said. Howard nodded slowly. Then he stood. Jonathan, I knew Robert Morgan for 40 years. He trusted you with his daughter and his legacy. You've spit on both. I move to terminate your position as CEO, effective immediately, and to refer this matter to law enforcement for criminal prosecution. All in favor, Patricia asked. 5 hands went up. Mine, Howard's, Patricia's, Robert's, Jennifer's. The motion carries, Patricia said. Jonathan Prescott, you are hereby terminated from Sterling Grand Hotels. Security will escort you from the premises. Mike and Tom appeared in the doorway. They moved toward Jonathan, professional and unyielding. Jonathan stood on shaking legs, his face twisted with rage. He looked at me, and for a moment I saw pure hatred. You think you've won? His voice dripped venom. You're just like your father, Sienna, cold, ruthless, and completely alone. He died with no one who truly loved him at his side. Is that the legacy you want? The words hit me like a physical blow. Nicholas stepped forward. I'd known Nicholas for 15 years. I'd never seen him lose his temper. Until now. Get out, Nicholas said, his voice low and dangerous. Before I forget that there are witnesses here. Jonathan sneered. What are you going to do, Foster? Nicholas moved. Not to hit him, he didn't need to. He simply stepped into Jonathan's space close enough that Jonathan stumbled backward. You will not speak about Robert Morgan. You will not speak to Sienna again. You will leave this building and you will pray that I never see you outside of a courtroom. Do you understand me? Jonathan's bravado crumbled. Mike and Tom took his arms, guiding him toward the door. But at the threshold, Jonathan turned back one last time. You'll regret this, he said, all of it. Then he was gone. The conference room felt hollow, like we'd expelled a poison, but the wound was still open and raw. Howard cleared his throat. Sienna, I'm sorry. If any of us had known— You couldn't have known, I said. My voice sounded strange, distant. He was very good at hiding it. What happens now? Jennifer asked. Now, I said, we call the police. We file a formal complaint, and we find a new CEO. I looked at Nicholas. Temporarily, I'm appointing Nicholas Foster as acting COO, reporting directly to me until we can restructure. Nicholas nodded, but his eyes never left my face. The board members began gathering their things. Edward started packing up the files, but I couldn't move because Jonathan's words were still echoing in my head. He died with no one who truly loved him at his side. Nicholas stepped forward, jaw-clenched hands curled into fists. In 15 years of friendship, I'd never seen him lose his composure. But now facing Jonathan, something in him finally erupted. You want to talk about Robert Morgan's passing, Jonathan? Then let's talk. Jonathan had been halfway to the door, Mike and Tom on either side of him. He stopped, turning back with a sneer that didn't quite hide the fear beneath. What are you going to do, Foster, defend your precious Sienna? I was there that night 3 years ago, Jonathan, Nicholas said quietly. Each word fell like a stone into still water. I saw what you did, or more accurately, what you didn't do when he called for help. The room went silent. I felt the blood drain from my face. Nicholas, what are you talking about? But Nicholas didn't look at me. His eyes stayed locked on Jonathan, and I saw something in them I'd never seen before. Not just anger, grief. Old buried grief that had been waiting 3 years to surface. Jonathan's face had gone pale. You don't know what you're talking about. I was there. Nicholas repeated, his voice hard as iron. I know exactly what happened, and so do you. My chest felt tight. Nicholas, he finally turned to me, and the pain in his eyes nearly broke me. Not here, he said softly. Not now. But you deserve to know the truth about that night, Sienna. I'll tell you everything. Just not in front of them. He gestured toward the board members. This is insane, Jonathan sputtered. He's making things up. Get him out of here, Nicholas said to Mike and Tom. Now. They didn't hesitate. Mike took Jonathan's arm more firmly. Jonathan struggled, his voice rising. You'll all regret this. I'll expose every one of you. The doors closed behind them, cutting off his threats. Howard cleared his throat. Nicholas, what are you saying about Robert's death? The medical examiner ruled it a heart attack. Natural causes. It was a heart attack, Nicholas said, his voice hollow. But the circumstances. He shook his head. This isn't the time or place. Sienna deserves to hear it first, privately. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. My father had died 3 years ago suddenly at home. Jonathan had called me at 2 a.m. Sienna, you need to come home. It's your father. He's gone. The doctors said it was a massive coronary event. Quick, painless. There was nothing anyone could have done. But Nicholas's words echoed in my head what you didn't do when he called for help. What hadn't Jonathan done? This meeting is adjourned, I heard myself say. Thank you all for your time. Edward, please proceed with filing the criminal complaint. They filed out slowly, casting concerned glances my way. Then they were gone, and it was just me, Nicholas, and Edward in the vast conference room. Edward was packing up his files. Sienna, we need to discuss. A knock at the door interrupted him. Claire Peterson burst in her face, flushed her phone clutched in her hand. Miss Morgan, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but we have a major problem. I turned to her, trying to focus. What is it? The live stream, Claire said, her voice tight with panic. Amber Mitchell's live stream from the lobby. It's gone viral, completely viral, and it's not good. She thrust her phone toward me. On the screen, a video was playing Amber's face, tear-streaked and desperate as security escorted her away. Her voice, they're silencing me. This is what the rich do. Da. The video cut to a different angle. Someone else's phone capturing me in the conference room doorway, my face cold and composed. Another cut, Jonathan looking pale and desperate, being surrounded by board members. The editing was deliberate, strategic. It made me look ruthless, made Jonathan look like a victim. I scrolled through the comments, thousands of them. Cold-hearted wife destroys her husband's career over an affair. CEO gets fired unjustly by his vengeful wife. Gold digger using a scandal to consolidate power. The phone felt heavy in my hand. I looked up at Claire. How many views? Last I checked, 2.3 million, Sir Claire said. And climbing. It's on every social media platform. News sites are starting to pick it up. Edward swore under his breath. Public opinion can turn a case before it ever gets to court. I handed the phone back to Claire, my mind racing. The battlefield had shifted. This wasn't about contracts and evidence anymore. This was about narrative, about who controlled the story. And right now I was losing. We need a strategy, Edward said. A statement at minimum. It's already worse, Claire said. Jonathan's lawyer released a statement 10 minutes ago. He's claiming wrongful termination defamation and emotional distress. He says you fabricated evidence because you were jealous. I stared at the city lights beyond the windows. Somewhere out there, millions of people were watching edited clips of my life, forming judgments based on lies and half-truths. Miss Morgan, Claire's voice was tentative. What do you want to do? I looked at Nicholas. He'd been silent since Claire arrived, standing by the window with his arms crossed. But his eyes were on me, steady and unwavering. What do you think? I asked him. I think, Nicholas said quietly, that the truth is on your side, and the truth always wins, eventually. Eventually might be too late, Edward said. The longer this narrative sits unchallenged, the more it solidifies. I took a deep breath. For the first time all day, I felt the full weight of everything pressing down on me. The confrontation, the board meeting, Jonathan's vicious words, Nicholas's revelation about my father, and now this, my reputation being shredded in real time. But I also felt something else. Clarity. I'd spent 12 years being careful, being diplomatic, staying quiet to keep the peace. I was done being quiet. We'll hold a press conference, I said. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. Claire's eyes widened. A press conference, Miss Morgan, are you sure? They're going to ask everything, I said. And I'm going to answer. We'll present the evidence, all of it. The embezzlement, the offshore accounts, Lucas, everything. I looked at Edward. Can you have the documentation ready? Yes, Edward said slowly. But Sienna, this is risky. You'll be putting yourself in front of cameras. I know, I said. But hiding makes me look guilty. And I'm not guilty. Jonathan is. Nicholas moved away from the window, coming to stand beside me. I'll be there, he said simply. Whatever you need. His words steadied me, made me remember who I was, Sienna Morgan, Robert Morgan's daughter, chairwoman of Sterling Grand Hotels, a woman who'd built a career on integrity and hard work, and I wasn't going to let lies destroy that. Claire, draft a brief statement for tonight, I said. Edward, prepare the evidence presentation. Nicholas, I need you to help me write what I'm going to say. He nodded. Of course. I looked at my phone again. 2.5 million views now. Let them watch. Tomorrow they'd see the whole truth. We have a lot of work to do, I said. Let's get started. Before Nicholas reveals what really happened in that hallway 3 years ago, comment your guess. Accident or intentional. I want to see what you think before I tell you. Just a note, what follows includes fictionalized details for storytelling purposes and may not be completely accurate. If that's not your preference, this is a good place to exit. Otherwise, let me show you what I discovered. The press conference was scheduled for 10 o'clock the next morning. That gave me 12 hours to face the thing I'd been avoiding all day going home. 12 hours to hear the truth about my father. 12 hours before everything I knew would be rewritten once again. The drive through Sterling Falls felt surreal. Streetlights blurred past as my driver navigated to the house in Oakmont Heights, the colonial with the wraparound porch. Home. Except it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a museum of lies. It was 8 o'clock when we pulled into the driveway. Then the front door burst open and 2 small figures came running out. Mom, you're home. Lily reached me first, nearly tackling me. Benjamin was right behind her, wrapping his arms around my waist. I sank to my knees and pulled them both close, breathing in the scent of their shampoo. We missed you so much, Lily said, her voice muffled against my shoulder. 6 weeks is forever. I know, baby, I whispered. I'm so sorry. I missed you too. Benjamin pulled back to look at me, his dark eyes, Jonathan's eyes searching my face. Where is Dad? Is he coming home soon? My throat tightened. Dad's going to be away for a while. He has some things he needs to take care of, but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. Promise? Lily asked, her small hand finding mine. I promise. Mrs. Helen Cartwright appeared in the doorway, concern in her expression. Miss Morgan, I'm so glad you're home. The children have been asking about Mr. Prescott all evening. You did exactly right, I said. Thank you, Helen. Why don't you head home? I've got them from here. After she left, I made hot chocolate for the kids and sat with them while they told me about everything I'd missed: Benjamin's soccer game, Lily's art project, normal things, beautiful things, things that had nothing to do with embezzlement or betrayal. By 9 o'clock, they were yawning. I tucked them into bed, kissing their foreheads and promising I'd be there when they woke up. Mom, Lily's voice was small in the darkness. Is Dad in trouble? I sat on the edge of her bed, smoothing her hair back. Grown-up trouble, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about. Just know that Dad and I love you very much. That will never change. I stood in the hallway afterwards, staring at the family photos lining the wall. Our wedding day. Jonathan holding newborn Lily. Benjamin's first birthday. How many of those smiles had been real? I was still standing in the living room, staring at our wedding portrait when the doorbell rang. Through the front window, I saw Nicholas standing on the porch, holding 2 paper bags. I opened the door. Nicholas, what are you doing here? I figured you hadn't eaten, he said. His tie was gone, his shirt sleeves rolled up. And I thought, you might not want to be alone tonight. Something in my chest cracked open. Come in. We ate in the kitchen Thai food from a place near the hotel. Nicholas knew I liked pad Thai with extra lime. Knew I always asked for spring rolls, but never finished them. He'd always known. The kids, he asked. Asleep, I said. They asked about Jonathan. I didn't know what to tell them. You'll figure it out, Nicholas said quietly. You always do. We finished eating in silence. Then we moved to the back porch, the one that overlooked the garden my father had helped me plant 7 years ago. I sat on the porch swing. Nicholas stood at the railing, looking out at the dark yard. Tell me about that night, I said. The night my father died. What did Jonathan do? Nicholas's shoulders tensed. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he turned to face me. 3 years ago. He began, his voice low. Your father had a cardiac emergency in his office late at night. I was working late too. I heard him call out weak struggling. I ran to him immediately, called 911, started CPR. He paused, his jaw working. But Jonathan was there too, Sienna, in the hallway. I know he heard your father calling for help. I saw him standing in the doorway watching. My heart stopped. For nearly 2 minutes, he just stood there, observing. Then he turned and walked away. By the time the paramedics arrived, those 2 minutes had made all the difference. The EMTs said if help had been provided immediately, there was a good chance he could have survived. I couldn't breathe. You're saying Jonathan heard my father dying and did nothing. I'm saying he failed to assist when he could have, Nicholas said carefully. I don't know what was in his head. Fear, maybe. Panic, or... He stopped. Or what? Nicholas looked away. Or calculation. Your father controlled the company. With him gone, Jonathan would have more power, more freedom. The words hung in the air like poison, and Jonathan had let him die. Why didn't you tell me? My voice broke. Why didn't you tell me 3 years ago? Nicholas's face creased with pain. I had no proof. It would have been my word against his. And you loved him, Sienna. You just lost your father. How could I break your heart again without evidence? He moved to sit beside me on the swing. So I waited, he continued. I watched. I collected every piece of evidence I could find against him, every irregularity, every questionable decision, every lie. I hoped that someday I could bring you justice for what he'd taken from you. 3 years. Nicholas had carried this alone for 3 years. The embezzlement investigation, I said slowly. You weren't just being thorough. You were building a case. I was waiting for him to make a mistake big enough that you'd see him for what he is, Nicholas said. I knew if you found out about the affair, you'd dig deeper. And once you started looking, you'd find everything. I stared at him. This man who'd been my friend since business school, who'd stood beside me through my father's funeral, through the birth of my children, through every triumph and crisis. He hadn't just been my friend, he'd been my silent guardian. Nicholas, I whispered. He looked at me and I saw everything he'd never said written in his eyes. The devotion, the patience, the quiet, steadfast love that had never asked for anything in return. I reached out and took his hand. His fingers closed around mine, warm and solid and real. Thank you, I said, for waiting, for protecting me, for caring enough to carry this burden alone. I'd carry it forever if it meant keeping you safe, Nicholas said quietly. We sat there in the darkness, hands clasped, the night settling around us. Tomorrow would bring the press conference, the public revelation, the legal battles. But tonight, for just a few hours, I wasn't alone. I had Nicholas, the man who'd loved me in silence, asking for nothing, giving everything. And for the first time since stepping into that lobby this afternoon, I felt hope. The press room at Sterling Grand was packed by 9:30 the next morning. Cameras lined the back wall, their red recording lights already glowing. Reporters from every major outlet filled the seats. Some looked sympathetic, most looked skeptical, all of them hungry for a story. I stood backstage with Nicholas and Edward watching through the gap in the curtains as the room filled. Claire moved through the crowd, distributing press packets with the evidence we'd prepared. You ready? Nicholas asked quietly. I looked at him. He'd barely slept. I could see it in the shadows under his eyes. We'd stayed up until 2 in the morning, going over every word of my statement. No, I said honestly, but I'm doing it anyway. At exactly 10 o'clock, Claire gave me the signal. I walked out onto the small stage, Nicholas and Edward following. The camera flashes were blinding. I took my position behind the podium and looked out at the sea of faces. Good morning. I began, my voice steady. My name is Sienna Morgan, chairwoman of Sterling Grand Hotels. I'm here to address the video currently circulating online and to set the record straight. The room settled into attentive silence. Yesterday, I returned home after 6 weeks in Dubai. What I discovered was not just infidelity, but systematic financial misconduct that threatened everything my father built. I paused, letting that sink in. I understand many of you have seen edited clips from yesterday's confrontation. Those clips don't show the full picture. They don't show that my husband had embezzled millions from this company. They don't show that he abandoned a 5-year-old child, his own son, in the foster care system. The reporters leaned forward now, pens moving across notebooks. I'm not here to ask for your sympathy, I continued. I'm here to present facts. Edward, Edward stepped forward and the screen behind us lit up with bank statements, rows of transactions highlighted in red. These are transfers from Sterling Grand's operational accounts, Edward explained, beginning 6 months ago and accelerating during Mrs. Morgan's absence. The funds moved through shell companies before landing in offshore accounts. Click. Next slide. More account numbers. More evidence. $850,000 was used to purchase a luxury condominium in the name of Amber Mitchell. $120,000 for a vehicle. $200,000 in designer goods and jewelry. Click. A deed appeared on screen, then a car registration, then receipts from high-end stores. The total amount embezzled is $3,500,000, Edward said. All transactions were authorized by CEO Jonathan Prescott. The room exploded with questions, reporters shouting over each other. I held up my hand. I'll take questions in a moment. But first, there's one more thing you need to see. Edward pulled up the final slide, a birth certificate, photos, a little boy with Jonathan's eyes, Lucas Prescott. I said quietly, 5 years old. His mother, Jennifer Walsh, died 2 years ago. Jonathan is his father. He has never paid child support, never visited, never acknowledged his existence. Lucas is currently in foster care. The room had gone very quiet. So yes, I said, I fired my husband yesterday. I did so after presenting this evidence to our board of directors who voted 5-0 to terminate his position. I filed a formal complaint with law enforcement, and I'm here today to tell you that no amount of viral videos or edited clips will change the facts. I gripped the podium. I gave Jonathan Prescott 12 years of my life, 2 children, and my trust. He repaid me with theft, lies, and betrayal. But I won't let him destroy my father's legacy, and I won't let him control the narrative. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the questions started. Mrs. Morgan, how long have you suspected the affair? When did you first notice the financial irregularities? What will happen to Lucas? I answered each one calmly, methodically. Edward filled in legal details. Nicholas stood to my left, silent but present. Then a voice cut through the others, sharp and hostile. Mrs. Morgan. A man in the third row stood. Isn't the truth that you and Mr. Foster have had an improper relationship for years, and this is just an excuse to remove your husband and install your companion in his place? The room erupted in whispers. Cameras swiveled toward me. I felt the question land like a physical blow. That's absurd, I started to say. Nicholas Foster is... But before I could finish, Nicholas stood. The room fell silent. Every camera turned toward him. He looked at me for a long moment, and in his eyes I saw determination, purpose, the look of a man about to do something that would change everything. I want to answer that question, he said, his voice steady, about my relationship with Sienna Morgan. I couldn't breathe. What was he doing? Nicholas stepped forward, taking the microphone. He didn't look at the reporters. He looked at me. Sienna and I met 15 years ago in business school, he began. We were friends, just friends. And when she married Jonathan Prescott, I stood in the back row of that church and watched, and I was happy for her. Because that's what you do when you love someone. You want them to be happy. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. But I need to be clear, Nicholas continued. The reporter asked if we've had an improper relationship. The answer is no. Sienna Morgan is the most honorable, ethical person I've ever known. She would never betray her marriage vows no matter how much her husband betrayed her. He paused, his jaw working. But was I in love with her? Yes. Have I been in love with her for 15 years? Yes. Did I stay close, watching and waiting, hoping that someday she'd see what her husband really was? Yes, I did. My vision blurred with tears. 3 years ago, Nicholas said, his voice dropping, I watched Jonathan Prescott fail to assist Sienna's father when he was having a cardiac emergency. I was there. I called 911. I performed CPR. Jonathan stood in the hallway and did nothing. For 2 minutes he stood there while Robert Morgan struggled to breathe. Then he walked away. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The paramedics said those 2 minutes made the difference. Nicholas continued. If help had been provided immediately, Robert might have survived, but Jonathan chose not to help. He turned to face the cameras directly. I didn't tell Sienna at the time because I had no proof, and she'd just lost her father. So I waited. I watched. I collected every piece of evidence I could find. And yesterday, when she discovered his affair and his theft, I finally had the chance to give her the truth she deserved. Nicholas looked back at me, his expression raw and vulnerable. So yes, I love her. I've loved her for 15 years, but I have never acted on it, never crossed a line, never asked her for anything. Because loving someone means protecting them, even if it's from your own feelings. The room erupted, questions flying from every direction, but I couldn't hear them. All I could see was Nicholas standing there with his heart laid bare for the world to see. And all I could think was, how did I not know? Nicholas looked at me one more time, and then he did something I never expected. He smiled. Not a smile of happiness, but one of relief, like someone who had carried a burden for far too long. And the act of laying it down brought a kind of freedom. The conference room fell silent. Every journalist leaned forward. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Nicholas adjusted the microphone. His hands were steady now, but I could see the faint tremor in his jaw, the only sign that what he was about to say cost him everything. "My name is Nicholas Foster," he began. "I've worked at Sterling Grand Hotels for 15 years. I started as a management trainee. Sienna Morgan was in the same cohort." He paused and his eyes found mine across the room. "I met her on the first day of orientation. She was 22 years old, brilliant, and completely unaware of how extraordinary she was. And he exhaled slowly, I fell in love with her that day." The room erupted. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, but Nicholas didn't flinch. "I never told her," Nicholas continued. "Not when we became friends, not when she got engaged, not when she married him, not when she had her children. I stayed silent because I loved her enough to let her be happy." A female reporter in the front row wiped her eyes. "But silence." Nicholas said, his tone darkening, "Doesn't mean I stopped watching, and it sure as hell doesn't mean I didn't see what Jonathan Prescott was doing to her." The shift in his voice was seismic. For 15 years, I stood beside Sienna Morgan. I watched her build an empire. I watched her sacrifice everything for a man who didn't deserve a single second of her time. Then he leaned forward, gripping the podium, and I watched Jonathan Prescott betray her in ways that go far beyond infidelity or financial fraud. The room went utterly still. Nicholas turned, slightly nodding to Edward. Edward stepped forward with a tablet, connecting it to the projection screen. A security camera timestamp appeared November 14th, 2022, 11:43 p.m. "This is footage from the executive floor 3 years ago," Edward explained. "The night Robert Morgan died." My breath caught. The footage played. My father's office light was on. The timestamp read 11:43:47 p.m. A figure appeared in the hallway. Jonathan. He walked toward my father's office, then stopped just outside the door. Then the office door burst open. My father stumbled out, clutching his chest, his face contorted in pain. He collapsed against the wall. Jonathan stood 3 feet away. He looked at my father. He didn't move. The timestamp read 11:44:58 p.m. Robert Morgan was having a heart attack. Nicholas said, his voice thick with controlled rage. Jonathan Prescott stood in that hallway and watched him suffer. The footage continued. At 11:45:22 p.m., another figure appeared, Nicholas, sprinting down the hallway. He dropped to his knees beside my father, immediately beginning CPR. At 11:45:40 p.m., Jonathan turned and walked away. "I called 911 at 11:47 p.m., Nicholas said. The paramedics arrived at 11:54 p.m. Robert Morgan was pronounced dead at 12:09 a.m. Edward advanced the slide. A medical report appeared on the screen. "This is the coroner's report," Edward said. The medical examiner noted that immediate intervention could have significantly increased the likelihood of survival. A 2-minute delay in emergency response can reduce survival rates by as much as 20 to 30%. Nicholas's hands gripped the podium so tightly his knuckles went white. "Jonathan Prescott didn't kill Robert Morgan," he said, his voice trembling with fury. "But he stood there and watched him die. He had 2 minutes to help and he chose to walk away." The room exploded. Journalists shouted questions. Camera flashes lit up the space like lightning. But I couldn't hear any of it. All I could see was the footage frozen on the screen, my father on the floor, Nicholas kneeling beside him, and Jonathan's retreating back. "Why?" a reporter shouted. "Why didn't he help?" Nicholas looked directly into the camera. "I've asked myself that question for 3 years. And the only answer I can come up with is this: Robert Morgan was the only person standing between Jonathan Prescott and complete control of Sterling Grand Hotels. With Robert alive, Jonathan would always be the CEO, but never the owner. With Robert dead, Sienna would inherit everything. And if Jonathan could control Sienna, he could control it all. The implication hung in the air like a noose. I didn't tell Sienna immediately. Nicholas admitted, his voice softening as he looked at me. I had no proof beyond my word, so I waited. I watched. I gathered every piece of evidence I could find. I waited for Jonathan Prescott to reveal himself. Nicholas turned fully toward me. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," he said quietly. "But I need you to know I have loved you for 15 years. I have protected you for 15 years. And I will stand beside you for as long as you'll let me." The conference room was utterly silent. Then someone started clapping. A single journalist in the back row, then another. Within seconds, the entire room was applauding, not polite applause, but raw, emotional applause of people who had just witnessed something real. I stood, frozen tears streaming down my face, unable to move or speak. Nicholas stepped down from the podium. He walked toward me, his expression open and unguarded in a way I'd never seen before. And as the cameras flashed and the applause continued, I realized something fundamental had shifted. The world had seen the truth. They had seen the evidence. But more than that, they had seen Nicholas Foster. They had seen 15 years of silent devotion. The press conference erupted with questions, but Edward stepped forward, raising his hand. "We'll take questions now," he said calmly. But I couldn't hear them. All I could see was Nicholas standing in front of me, the weight of 15 years finally lifted from his shoulders. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I could breathe. By 9 o'clock that evening, I had fielded 47 phone calls, approved 3 PR strategies with Claire, and declined 24 interview requests. I thought the chaos had finally begun to settle. Then the doorbell rang, and the last person I expected to see was standing on my front porch. Amber Mitchell mascara streaked down her face, her red dress stained and wrinkled, looking like she'd just survived a personal apocalypse. I stood in the doorway and stared at her. The woman who had thrown wine on me, the woman who had live-streamed my humiliation, the woman who had claimed my husband as her fiancé. And now she was here, swaying, slightly reeking of wine and desperation. "What do you want?" My voice was flat, drained of emotion. Amber's eyes were red and swollen. Her hands shook as she gripped the porch railing for balance. "You destroyed everything," she said, her voice thick with alcohol and tears. "Jonathan won't answer my calls. The condo's been seized. My bank accounts are frozen. I have nothing." I felt no sympathy, not even a flicker. "You made your choices, Amber," I said coldly. "You threw wine on me. You threatened me. You participated in financial crimes. Those were your decisions. Now you get to live with the consequences." I started to close the door. "Wait!" She lunged forward, her hands slamming against the door frame. "Please, just let me explain." "Explain what?" I asked, my patience evaporating. "That you seduced my husband, that you helped him embezzle millions, that you live-streamed a manipulated version of events to destroy my reputation. You don't understand." Amber's voice cracked, rising into hysteria. "I didn't do this for the money. I didn't even do it for him." "Then why?" I demanded. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face, and for the first time I saw something other than arrogance. I saw pain. "Because he owed me," she whispered. "Robert Morgan owed my mother. He owed us." The world seemed to tilt. I gripped the doorframe. "What are you talking about?" Amber laughed, a broken, bitter sound. "He destroyed her life and then threw her away like garbage," she said, her voice shaking. "My mother loved him. She gave him everything, and he used her, lied to her, and left her with nothing. She raised me alone in a one-bedroom apartment while he built his empire and played the perfect family man. My chest tightened. I didn't want to hear this. And you, she continued, venomous and desperate. You got everything. The name, the money, the perfect life, private schools, vacations, a father who was there for every birthday, every graduation, while I had nothing. She took a step closer and I saw it. Then the thing I'd been trying to place since the first moment I'd seen her. The tilt of her chin, the shape of her eyes, the way her nose curved slightly at the bridge. Oh God, he was my father too, Sienna. The words landed like a physical blow. The wine glass I'd been holding slipped from my hand and shattered on the porch. What did you just say? My voice was barely a whisper. Amber looked up at me, and for the first time I truly saw her face. The curve of her jawline, the set of her eyes, the small dimple in her left cheek. The same dimple my father had. You're lying, I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew it was true. I'm not, Amber said quietly. My mother's name was Catherine Mitchell. She worked at Sterling Grand in the early 2000s. She and Robert had an affair for 2 years. When she got pregnant, he promised to take care of us, but when I was born, he changed his mind, paid her $20,000 to disappear, and never contact him again. I felt like I was drowning. Catherine Mitchell died 4 years ago. Amber continued, her voice hollow. Breast cancer. She couldn't afford treatment. And you want to know the worst part, she still loved him. She still kept a photo of him on her nightstand. Tears were streaming down my face now. So when Jonathan found out who I was, when he realized I was Robert Morgan's illegitimate daughter, he saw an opportunity, Amber said. He told me we could take back what was ours. That together we could make him pay. He's already dead, I whispered. You can't make a dead man pay. No. Amber agreed, her voice breaking. But I could make you pay. I could take everything you had the way he took everything from me. The silence that followed was suffocating. I stared at her, this broken, desperate woman who shared my blood. My sister. I need proof. I finally said, my voice shaking. If what you're saying is true, I need proof. Amber reached into her purse with trembling hands and pulled out a worn envelope. Inside was a photograph my father, decades younger, his arm around a beautiful woman with dark hair and Amber's eyes. On the back, in faded ink, Robert and Catherine, 2001. Beneath the photo was a birth certificate. Father's name, Robert James Morgan. I took the envelope with numb fingers, staring at the documents that shattered everything I thought I knew. I'm sorry, Amber whispered. I'm so sorry. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Nicholas appeared in the doorway, his expression shifting from concern to alarm as he took in the scene. Sienna, he said carefully. What's going on? I couldn't answer. I just handed him the birth certificate and watched his face change as he read it. Jesus Christ, he breathed. Amber wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking very young and very lost. I'll take a DNA test, she said quietly. I'll prove it. I just needed you to know. I needed you to understand why. Get off my porch, I said, my voice hollow. Sienna, get off my porch. Amber flinched, but she nodded. She turned and walked down the steps, disappearing into the darkness. I stood there, birth certificate in hand, and felt my entire world collapse for the second time in 24 hours. Nicholas touched my shoulder gently. Come inside, he said softly. We'll figure this out. But as he guided me back into the house, I couldn't stop thinking about the photograph, my father's smile, Catherine's hopeful eyes, and the daughter he'd left behind. I let Amber into my house, not because I trusted her, not because I believed what she was saying, but because I needed to know whether the man I'd spent my entire life idolizing had been living a lie bigger than any Jonathan had ever told. She stood in my foyer, mascara streaked and trembling, looking like a ghost of the arrogant woman who'd thrown wine on me just yesterday. Sit, I said, my voice flat. I wasn't offering hospitality. I was demanding answers. Amber followed me into the living room and sank onto the couch. I went to the kitchen, poured 2 cups of coffee, black bitter utilitarian, and returned. I set one in front of her without a word. Start talking, I said, and don't lie to me. I've had enough lies to last a lifetime. Amber took a shaky breath. "My mother's name was Linda Mitchell," she began. "She worked as an executive assistant at Sterling Grand 33 years ago, before you were born." I said nothing, waited. "She and Robert Morgan had an affair that lasted 2 years," Amber continued. "She got pregnant with me. He promised her everything, that he'd leave your mother, marry her, build a life together. But when it came time to choose, he chose his family, his image, his empire." Her voice broke. "He paid my mother $50,000 to disappear and never contact him again." The words landed like stones in still water. "Prove it," I said coldly. Amber reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a worn shoebox. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. The first showed a young Robert Morgan with his arm around a beautiful woman with dark hair and striking eyes. They were laughing, pressed close together in a way that spoke of intimacy. The second was a handwritten letter on hotel stationery. I recognized my father's distinctive cursive. Immediately, "Linda, my darling, last night was everything. I can't stop thinking about you. Forever yours, Robert." The third photograph made my breath catch. My father, slightly older now, holding a newborn baby. The photo was grainy, taken from a distance, but the tenderness in his expression was unmistakable. "My mother kept everything," Amber said quietly. "She never spoke badly of him while I was growing up. But when she got sick, stage 4 cancer last year, she finally told me the truth. She died 6 months ago." Her voice cracked. "That's when I decided the Morgan family owed me something." I stared at the photographs spread across my coffee table. My hands were shaking. "Why now?" I asked. "Why come after me? Why help Jonathan?" Amber laughed bitterly. "Jonathan found out about my connection to Robert. He seduced me, told me we could take down the Morgan empire together, that you didn't deserve what you had. I thought I was using him to get close to you, to destroy you, but he was using me the whole time. I was just another pawn." I stood abruptly, the photographs clutched in my hand, and walked to my father's study. I pulled open the bottom drawer where I kept the family photo albums. I placed the photograph of Robert and Linda beside a family photo from the same era. The resemblance was undeniable. Same smile, same way he held his shoulders. And when I placed Amber's baby photo beside one of me at the same age, my stomach dropped. We had the same nose, the same curve to our jawline, the same small dimple in the left cheek. Oh God. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and dialed Edward Stratton. It was past midnight, but he answered on the second ring. "Sienna, what's wrong?" "I need a discrete DNA test," I said. "Compare Amber Mitchell to my father's genetic profile from his medical records. I don't care what it costs. I need to know." "Are you sure?" "Yes. I'll make the calls. We can have preliminary results in 72 hours. Do it." I hung up and returned to the living room. "I called my lawyer," I said. "We're doing a DNA test. If you're lying, I will destroy you in ways that make what I did to Jonathan look merciful." "I'm not lying," Amber whispered. The doorbell rang. I'd sent Nicholas a single text 20 minutes ago, "I need you." I opened the door. Nicholas stood on the porch, still dressed in the same suit from the press conference. He took one look at my face and stepped inside without a word. "What happened?" he asked. I handed him the photographs. I watched his expression shift from confusion to shock to something darker, understanding. "Jesus," he breathed. "Is this—" Her mother, as I confirmed. Amber claims Robert was her father. Nicholas looked past me to where Amber sat hunched on the couch, his entire body tensed. "I know," I said quietly, "but if this is true, it doesn't change who I am or what I've built. It just explains things." He turned to Amber. "You weren't just a gold digger. You were looking for revenge for wounds you didn't even suffer directly." Amber flinched but didn't deny it. "Jonathan found out who I was," she said, her voice hollow. "He told me we could take everything from Sienna together. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to hurt her. But I didn't realize he was using me the exact same way Robert used my mother. I was just another tool, another disposable woman." The room fell silent. I looked at this young woman, this girl who might be my sister, sobbing on my couch, and I felt something I didn't expect, not anger, but a deep aching sadness. "Amber," I said quietly. She looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "If the DNA test confirms what you're saying, then we need to talk. Not as enemies, as family." Something flickered in her expression, hope maybe, or disbelief. But first, I continued, my voice hardening, you're going to help me make sure Jonathan Prescott pays for what he did to both of us. Amber straightened slightly. What do you need me to do? Testify, I said. Tell the truth about how he manipulated you, how he used your connection to my father to gain leverage. She hesitated for only a moment. Then she nodded. Okay, she whispered. I'll do it. Nicholas moved to stand beside me, his presence solid and grounding. We'll need to be strategic, Nicholas said. Jonathan's already launching a PR counterattack. If Amber testifies, we need to make sure her story is airtight. Edward's already on it, I replied. DNA results in 72 hours. After that, we tell the whole truth, not just about Jonathan, about Robert, too. Amber's eyes widened. You'd do that. You'd expose your own father. He lied, I said simply. To me, to my mother, to you and your mother. I won't build my legacy on his lies. For the first time since she'd arrived, Amber's expression softened. Thank you, she whispered. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to forgive, but I was ready to face the truth no matter how ugly it was. Nicholas touched my elbow gently. You should get some rest. I nodded, suddenly aware of how exhausted I was. Amber, I said, you can stay in the guest room tonight. We'll sort everything else out tomorrow. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry for everything. I held her gaze for a long moment. I know, I said quietly. Now let's make sure Jonathan is too. 3 days of waiting. 3 days of Amber staying in my guest room, the two of us not quite knowing how to make conversation over morning coffee. 3 days of Nicholas checking on me every few hours. And then on Thursday afternoon, Edward finally called with 2 pieces of news. The DNA results were in, and Jonathan had been arrested. I sat in Edward's office and felt the weight of those 3 days pressing down on me. Amber sat beside me, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Nicholas stood by the window, his presence solid and reassuring. Edward placed a folder on the desk between us. His expression was carefully neutral, the way lawyers look when they're about to deliver news that will change everything. The DNA results are conclusive, he said quietly. 99.97% probability of paternity. Amber Mitchell is Robert Morgan's biological daughter, your half-sister. The words hung in the air. Had known the moment I saw those photographs, but hearing it confirmed with scientific certainty made it undeniably real. I'm sorry, Sienna, Edward added gently. I took a slow breath. What about Jonathan? Edward's expression hardened. He was arrested yesterday. Multiple charges: embezzlement, wire fraud, financial malfeasance. The DA is also investigating the circumstances surrounding your father's death, but without direct evidence of intent to harm, criminal charges on that front are unlikely. My chest tightened. Proving Jonathan deliberately let my father die would be nearly impossible. However, Edward continued, the embezzlement charges alone carry a potential sentence of up to 20 years. 20 years. It should have felt like justice. Instead, it just felt hollow. Will he try to implicate Amber? I asked. He already has, Edward said grimly. His lawyers are claiming she was a co-conspirator, that she seduced him and manipulated him into the financial crimes. Amber flinched, her face going pale. We know, I said firmly, and we'll prove it. Edward nodded. That's why Amber's testimony is crucial. If she testifies truthfully about how Jonathan found out about her connection to Robert, how he approached her, how he manipulated her, it destroys his narrative. Amber looked at me, her eyes wide and frightened. What if they don't believe me? They'll believe you, I said, because you're going to tell the truth. All of it. And because I'm going to stand beside you and make it clear that despite everything, your family. Her eyes filled with tears. Edward opened another folder. I've drafted a witness cooperation agreement. If Amber testifies fully and truthfully, the DA has agreed to immunity from prosecution on the financial crimes. She'll have to return any assets purchased with embezzled funds, but she won't face jail time. He slid the document across the desk. Amber stared at it. Why would you do this for me? She asked, her voice breaking. After everything I did to you, why? I leaned forward, meeting her eyes directly. Because the DNA test confirmed what I already knew, I said quietly. You're my sister. And because both of us deserve better than the men who disappointed us. Amber's hands shook as she picked up the pen. She read through the document carefully, then signed her name in deliberate letters. I'll tell them everything, she said, her voice steadier now. Every conversation with Jonathan, every lie he told me, every promise he made, all of it. Edward collected the signed agreement. The trial date has been set for 2 weeks from today. We'll meet several times before then to prepare your testimony. Sienna, you'll also need to testify about the business arrangements and the events at the hotel. I nodded. 2 weeks. 14 days until I would sit in a courtroom and watch my ex-husband face justice. There's one more thing, Edward said. The press has been relentless. Everyone wants your story. How do you want to handle it? I thought about it for a moment. About Nicholas's public confession. About the viral videos. No interviews until after the trial, I said finally. I won't turn this into a media circus. Jonathan gets his day in court. We present our evidence, let the justice system work. And after? Edward asked. After? I glanced at Amber. After we tell the whole truth. About Jonathan, about Robert, about all of it. No more lies. Edward made a note. I'll handle the press requests. Anything else? I looked at Nicholas, who'd been silent throughout the entire meeting. He caught my eye and gave me a small, reassuring nod. That's all for now, I said. We left Edward's office together, the three of us stepping out into the autumn afternoon. The air was crisp and clear, carrying the scent of fallen leaves. Amber pulled her jacket tighter. Thank you, she said quietly, for the immunity deal, for everything. Don't thank me yet, I replied. You still have to testify, and it won't be easy. I know, she met my eyes. But I owe you the truth. I owe my mother the truth. And I owe myself a chance to be someone other than the bitter, angry person I've been. I studied her face, this stranger who shared my father's features. Where will you go? I asked. After the trial. I don't know, she admitted. I've spent so long focused on revenge that I never thought about what comes after. You could stay, I heard myself say. In the city, I mean. We have a lot to figure out about our family, about Robert's past. It might be easier if we're not on opposite coasts. Amber's eyes widened. You'd want that after everything. I don't know what I want yet, I said honestly. But I know that family, real family, is complicated. It's messy and imperfect and sometimes painful, but it's also worth fighting for. Nicholas cleared his throat gently. I should get back to the hotel, board meeting in an hour. He looked at me. You okay? It was the question he'd asked me 100 times in the past week, but this time I stopped and actually thought about it. My marriage was over. My father's legacy was far more complicated than I'd ever known. I had a half-sister I'd met under the worst possible circumstances. Jonathan was facing decades in prison, and yet, I think I will be, I said slowly. For the first time in years, I'm not living in a carefully constructed illusion. Everything's messy and painful and real, and somehow that feels like progress. Nicholas smiled, something genuine and warm. That's all anyone can ask for. He squeezed my shoulder briefly, then headed toward his car. I watched him go, this man who'd loved me silently for 15 years, who'd stood beside me through the worst week of my life. Amber shifted beside me. He loves you, she said quietly. Like really loves you. I know. Are you going to? I don't know, I said again. Right now I need to focus on the trial, on my kids, on figuring out who I am without Jonathan. And after, I looked at her, my sister, this unexpected piece of my father's hidden life. After we figure out what family means, all of us. She nodded slowly. I'd like that. We stood there for a moment, two women connected by blood and betrayal, watching the autumn leaves fall like pieces of the past finally letting go. Come on, I said, let's get coffee. For the first time since she'd appeared on my doorstep, Amber laughed. It was small and tentative, but it was real, and somehow that felt like a beginning. 2 weeks later, I walked into the federal courthouse on a cold October morning. The building was all marble and authority, the kind of place where truth was supposed to matter more than money or charm. I hoped That was true. Because today, Jonathan Prescott would finally face the consequences of every choice he'd made. The courtroom was packed. Journalists filled the gallery, their notebooks ready. I saw colleagues from Sterling Grand, board members, former employees. People who'd worked alongside Jonathan for years, never suspecting what he was capable of. Nicholas sat beside me in the front row, his presence steady and grounding. On my other side sat Amber, dressed in a conservative navy suit that made her look younger and more vulnerable. She'd spent the past 2 weeks preparing for this moment. Judge Patricia Westbrook entered a woman in her early 60s with steel gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen every con, every manipulation, every desperate lie. She took her seat with calm authority. All rise. The United States District Court for the Southern District of New York is now in session. Jonathan was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed in front of him. He'd lost weight in the 2 weeks since his arrest. His hair was unkempt, his face haggard. But when his eyes found mine across the courtroom, they burned with undiluted hatred. District Attorney Thomas Brennan stood his voice clear and confident. Your Honor, the United States will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant, Jonathan Prescott, engaged in a systematic scheme to embezzle $3.5 million from Sterling Grand Hotels over a period of 6 months. The evidence was overwhelming. Brennan methodically walked the jury through bank statements, transfer records, emails with falsified vendor invoices. Nicholas had documented everything meticulously, every transaction, every timestamp, every lie. Then Amber took the stand. She looked small in the witness box, her hands folded tightly in her lap. But when she spoke, her voice was steady. State your name for the record. Amber Mitchell. Ms. Mitchell, how did you meet the defendant? He approached me 9 months ago at a networking event. He already knew who I was, who my mother was. He'd done research and discovered my connection to Robert Morgan. And what did he tell you? He told me that Sienna Morgan didn't deserve the empire her father had built, that Robert had been a hypocrite who'd abandoned my mother and me. He said, if we worked together, we could take back what was rightfully mine. What did he ask you to do? He asked me to apply for a position at Sterling Grand, to get close to Sienna, to gather information. He promised we'd expose the Morgan family's secrets and split the profits. When did you realize it wasn't justice? When I saw the numbers, Amber said quietly. When I realized he wasn't trying to expose anything, he was stealing. And he was using my pain, my anger, my grief. He was using all of it to cover his crimes. The cross-examination was brutal. Jonathan's attorney tried to paint Amber as a willing accomplice. But Amber held firm, acknowledging her mistakes without deflecting responsibility. I did terrible things, she said clearly. I threw wine on Sienna. I live-streamed lies. I helped Jonathan in ways I'm ashamed of. But I'm here now to tell the truth. All of it. When she stepped down, I caught her eye and gave her a small nod. She'd done it. Nicholas testified briefly about discovering the financial irregularities, about how the Dubai deal had been a legitimate business opportunity that Jonathan had exploited for personal gain. His testimony was factual, precise, unassailable. Then it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand with my head high. After establishing the timeline and evidence, Brennan asked the question I'd been waiting for. Mrs. Morgan, would you like to make a victim impact statement? I turned to face Judge Westbrook directly. Your Honor, Jonathan Prescott didn't just steal money from the company my father built. He stole 12 years of my life. He stole my trust in my own judgment. He stole my children's intact family. And most painfully, he failed to help my father when he needed it, most prioritizing his own ambition over basic human decency. My voice remained steady. I'm not asking for vengeance. I'm asking for accountability. I returned to my seat. The courtroom was utterly silent. Then Judge Westbrook looked at Jonathan. Mr. Prescott, you have the right to make a statement before sentencing. Do you wish to do so? Jonathan stood slowly. His lawyer touched his arm, clearly advising against it, but Jonathan shook him off. Accountability. Jonathan's voice dripped with venom. That's rich, Sienna. You're exactly like your father, a hypocrite pretending to have honor while crushing anyone who gets in your way. Judge Westbrook's expression darkened. Mr. Prescott, Robert Morgan abandoned his own child. Jonathan continued, his voice rising. "And you built an empire on his lies. You set a trap for me, manipulated me, and now you stand there playing the wronged wife. When I finally tried to have something of my own, you destroyed me." He laughed bitterly. "So congratulations, Sienna, you won. But don't pretend to be some noble victim." The courtroom erupted. Judge Westbrook slammed her gavel. "Order Mr. Prescott sit down." "That's enough." Judge Westbrook's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Mr. Prescott, your statement confirms exactly what I suspected. You have no remorse. You take no responsibility. You blame everyone but yourself." She looked down at the papers before her. "On the charges of wire fraud and embezzlement, I find you guilty on all counts. You are hereby sentenced to 18 years in federal prison, eligible for parole after serving 2/3 of your term. Additionally, you are ordered to pay full restitution of $3.5 million to Sterling Grand Hotels." The gavel came down with finality. "This court is adjourned." U.S. Marshals moved forward to escort Jonathan out. As they led him past me in handcuffs, he turned his head one last time. There was no remorse in his eyes, only hatred. I realized in that moment that he would spend the next 18 years believing his own lies, never understanding what he'd truly lost. But I didn't need his understanding. I didn't need his apology. I just needed him gone. And now finally he was. Nicholas's hand found mine as we stood. His grip was warm and solid. "It's over," he said quietly. I looked at him, this man who'd stood beside me through everything, who'd loved me silently for 15 years. "No," I said softly. "It's just beginning." Amber appeared at my other side, her eyes red but clear. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing me, for giving me a chance." I squeezed her hand. "We're family. That's what family does." As we walked out of the courthouse together into the cold October sunlight, reporters swarmed us. Cameras flashed. Questions were shouted. But I kept walking, flanked by Nicholas and Amber, toward the car waiting at the curb. Behind us, the doors of the courthouse closed on Jonathan Prescott and the life he'd destroyed. Ahead of us lay something uncertain and complicated and real. And for the first time in 12 years, I was ready to face it. They say time heals all wounds. 6 months after Jonathan's sentencing, I wasn't sure about healing, but I knew this. I was no longer the woman who'd stepped off that plane last summer, exhausted and naive. I'd become someone stronger, clearer, someone finally ready to build a life on truth instead of illusions. I stood in my renovated office, the space that had once been my father's, then Jonathan's, and now finally mine, reviewing the quarterly reports. The numbers told a story of recovery and growth. Sterling Grand Hotels revenue up 28% compared to 6 months prior. Employee satisfaction scores at an all-time high. Guest reviews overwhelmingly positive, praising renewed authenticity and genuine hospitality. Nicholas had been promoted to Chief Operating Officer, working in seamless partnership with me. Where Jonathan had schemed and stolen, Nicholas built and protected. The difference was night and day. My phone buzzed. "A text from Amber Coffee tomorrow. I want to show you my midterm paper. Professor says it's the best in the class." I smiled. 6 months ago, I couldn't have imagined this casual texts from my half-sister, pride in her accomplishments, plans for coffee like normal siblings. Amber had enrolled in a business program at the community college. She took a part-time position in Sterling Grand's marketing department entry level, earning her place through effort. She started therapy, working through the pain her mother had carried. One afternoon, about 3 months ago, we'd been reviewing a marketing proposal when Amber suddenly set down her pen. "I'm sorry," she'd said quietly, "for everything. I know I've said it before, but I need you to know I mean it. Every day." I'd looked at this young woman, my sister, and felt something unexpected forgiveness. "I know," I'd replied. "And I'm sorry, too, for what our father did to you and your mother. You deserved better than that." We'd both cried then, grieving together for the father who'd failed us both in different ways. Now 6 months later, we were building something real. Not perfect, but genuine. My phone buzzed again. "Nicholas, dinner tonight. I have something I want to show you." My heart did that strange flip it had been doing lately whenever I saw his name. We'd been taking things slowly, coffee dates, family dinners with Lily and Benjamin, long walks through Central Park. Nothing rushed, nothing forced. Just two people who'd known each other for 15 years, finally allowing themselves to explore what had always been there. The kids had noticed, of course. Last week at dinner, Lily had looked up from her pasta with her usual 9-year-old directness. "Mom, is Nicholas going to be our new dad?" I'd frozen. Would you want that? Lily had considered this seriously. "He's really nice, and he makes you laugh more than Dad ever did." Benjamin had nodded enthusiastically. "Plus, he actually plays catch with me and doesn't look at his phone the whole time." "We'll see," I'd said carefully. "But if that's something that happens someday, you'd both be okay with it." "More than okay," Lily had said firmly. Now standing in my office as the April sun streamed through the windows, I texted Nicholas back, "What time?" 7 p.m. rooftop restaurant. Dress nice. I felt butterflies, actual butterflies at 32 years old, like a teenager planning a first date. The rooftop restaurant had been one of my renovation projects. Tonight, it was closed to the public, lit only by strings of fairy lights and candlelight. Nicholas stood by the railing wearing a dark suit that fit him perfectly. He turned when I approached, and the look in his eyes made my breath catch. "Hi," I said softly. "Hi," he smiled. "You look beautiful." He'd arranged a private dinner, simple but perfect. We ate and talked easily, the conversation flowing the way it always had. But I could sense something beneath the surface, a tension that wasn't anxiety, but anticipation. After dessert, Nicholas stood and offered his hand. "Walk with me." We moved to the edge of the rooftop. The city sprawled below us, millions of lights against the darkness. Sienna. Nicholas began, his voice steady but emotion-filled. "I've been waiting 15 years to ask you this question." My heart started pounding. "I would wait another 15 if you needed me to," he continued, "but I'm hoping tonight you'll say yes." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. But when he opened it, instead of a ring, there was a delicate compass pendant, white gold, beautifully crafted. "This compass represents what you've always been to me," Nicholas said quietly. "My true north. The person who keeps me steady, guides me, reminds me what matters. For 15 years, you've been my direction." His eyes met mine, steady and sure. "Will you let me be yours?" Tears blurred my vision. This wasn't the proposal I'd had with Jonathan, no elaborate scheme, no public performance. This was just Nicholas offering himself with complete honesty. "For 15 years, I loved you silently," he said. "I watched you marry someone else. I watched you survive betrayal and discover painful truths. And through all of it, I never stopped loving you. I never will." He took a breath. "I don't need grand gestures or perfect timing. I just need you. Will you marry me, Sienna?" I looked at the compass resting in his palm, beautiful, meaningful, pointing true north, just like Nicholas himself. "Yes," I whispered, then louder through tears. "Yes, Nicholas, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the compass around my neck, his hands gentle and sure. Then he kissed me soft and sweet, and full of 15 years of longing, finally allowed to surface. When we pulled apart, both of us were crying and laughing simultaneously. "I love you," I said. "I think maybe I always have, but I was too blind to see it." "I know," he replied, smiling. "I could wait. I had enough love for both of us until you were ready." We stood there on the rooftop, holding each other as the city lights sparkled around us, and the compass rested against my heart, pointing steadfastly north. Below us, Sterling Grand Hotel glowed with life, a building my father had built that Jonathan had tried to steal, that I had reclaimed and transformed into something better. But it was just a building. This Nicholas's arms around me, his heartbeat steady against mine, the promise of a future built on truth and trust. This was real. 6 months ago, I'd stood in a courthouse and watched my marriage end in handcuffs and hatred. Tonight, I stood on a rooftop and said yes to a future I'd never imagined, but somehow always needed. The compass hung around my neck, steady and sure, pointing north. And for the first time in years, maybe in my entire life, I knew exactly where I was going. 2 years is long enough to build a new life, for old wounds to scar over, for a family to form from the most unexpected pieces. 2 years is long enough to learn that forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing not to let the past write your future. I stood on the marble steps of Sterling Grand Hotel's newest wing, the Morgan Foster Family Center, holding a pair of oversized scissors. Nicholas stood beside me, his hand resting gently on my lower back. Our children surrounded us: Lily at 11, tall and confident, Benjamin at 9, grinning with his father's dimples, and Lucas at 7, shy but smiling, his small hand tucked into mine. Our family, built from wreckage and love and deliberate choice. This wing represents everything I've learned over the past 3 years. I said into the microphone, my voice carrying across the gathered crowd of employees, board members, and press. Family isn't defined by perfection or bloodlines. It's defined by showing up, by forgiveness, by choosing love even when it's hard. I looked down at Lucas, who squeezed my hand. My father wasn't perfect. I'm not perfect. But we can build something better for the next generation. I cut the ribbon. Applause erupted. The doors opened to reveal a beautiful space-subsidized childcare for employees, family suites for guests, lactation rooms, play areas, all the things that said you matter, your family matters. We see you. Nicholas leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. He would have been proud of you. Which one? I asked softly. Robert or Jonathan? The one who matters, Nicholas replied. You. After the ribbon-cutting guests toured the facility, I found myself in a quiet corner with Amber, who'd arrived with her fiancé Ryan, a kind-faced accountant she'd met in one of her business classes. She looked radiant. Gone was the mascara-streaked, desperate woman who'd appeared on my doorstep 2.5 years ago. This Amber wore a simple dress and genuine smile, her dark hair pulled back engagement ring catching the light. "Thank you for inviting us," she said quietly, "for everything you've done." I hugged her, a real hug, warm and unhesitating. "Your family, that means something now. It means everything," she whispered. Then pulling back with tears in her eyes, "I graduate next month, business degree, magna cum laude. Mom would have been proud." She would have. I agreed, and so would Robert, despite everything. Amber nodded. We talked about our father many times over the past 2 years, about his failures, his lies, but also his capacity to build something meaningful. He'd been flawed and human, capable of both great love and terrible selfishness. We'd learned to hold both truths simultaneously. "I'm thinking of applying for the junior management program," Amber said tentatively, "here at Sterling, but only if you think you should absolutely apply." I interrupted. "You'll go through the same process as everyone else, but if you earn it, you'll have a place here." Her smile could have lit the entire building. Later, I found Lucas standing alone by the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the city. He was small for 7, with Jonathan's dark hair but eyes that were entirely his own, thoughtful and observant. I knelt beside him. "What are you thinking about, sweetheart?" "Am I like him?" Lucas asked quietly. "My dad, my Jonathan." My heart clenched. We'd been careful with Lucas working with child psychologists to help him understand his complicated origins. He knew Jonathan was his biological father. He knew Jonathan had made terrible choices, and he knew that blood didn't determine destiny. "You know what?" I said gently. "Your biological father made serious mistakes, but those mistakes don't define you. You get to choose who you become." Lucas looked up at me with those serious eyes. "I know, Mom." The word still made my chest tight with gratitude. He'd started calling me Mom about 6 months ago, tentatively at first, then with increasing confidence. Nicholas was Dad. Lily and Benjamin were simply his siblings, no qualifiers needed. "Nicholas' dad told me something," Lucas continued. "He said I'm the luckiest kid because I get to learn from everyone's mistakes without making them myself." I laughed through sudden tears. That sounds exactly like something he'd say. Lucas leaned against me. "I'm glad I'm here, with you guys. So are we, buddy, so are we." As the event wound down, we walked to the parking lot, all 5 of us, plus Amber and Ryan. The spring air was perfect, carrying the scent of cherry blossoms and fresh possibility. Then I saw him. Across the street, partially obscured by a bus shelter, stood a figure that made my steps falter. Jonathan. Older, gaunt, wearing clothes that hung loose on his frame. He'd been released early, some combination of good behavior and prison overcrowding I'd heard through Edward's network. 2 years served of an 18-year sentence. He was watching us, just watching. Lily noticed my pause. Mom, isn't that— It doesn't matter, honey, I said quietly. Nicholas's hand found mine, his grip steady and protective. Do you want to— I looked at Jonathan for a long moment. This man who'd shared my bed for 12 years, who'd fathered Benjamin and Lily, who'd betrayed me in ways I'd once thought would destroy me. And I felt nothing. Not anger, not pain, not even pity, just indifference. He was a stranger now, someone from a life I'd outgrown so completely that his presence couldn't touch me. The hurt he'd caused had scarred over, leaving me stronger, but fundamentally unchanged in the ways that mattered. I turned away, lacing my fingers through Nicholas's, my other hand resting on Lucas's shoulder. Come on, I said. Who wants ice cream? The kids cheered. Even Amber laughed, linking her arm through Ryan's. We walked toward the cars, our voices mixing with the sounds of the city, vibrant, alive, moving forward. I didn't look back. Behind me was nothing worth seeing, only ghosts and ashes of a life I'd moved far beyond. Everything that mattered was right here. Nicholas's steady hand in mine, my children's voices, bright with plans for ice cream flavors, and the bone-deep knowledge that I'd survived the worst kind of betrayal and emerged not just intact, but stronger. People say the best revenge is success. But I'd learned something deeper. The best revenge is building a life so full of genuine love and hard-won truth that the darkness simply can't reach you anymore. Jonathan Prescott had taken many things from me, my innocence, my trust, years I would never get back. But he hadn't taken my strength. He hadn't taken my capacity to forgive. And he hadn't taken my future. That I had built myself? With Nicholas, with my children, with Amber, with everyone who'd stood beside me when the world felt like it was collapsing. 3 years ago, I'd stepped off a plane believing I understood everything. I'd been wrong. Now I understood what everything actually meant. And this time it was real. Lucas tugged on my hand. Mom, can I get 2 scoops? I smiled down at him, this unexpected gift, this child born from betrayal but raised in love. Absolutely. Nicholas squeezed my hand. You okay? I looked at him, this man who'd waited 15 years, who'd loved me through my worst mistakes and darkest revelations, who'd shown me that real love is patient and kind and enduring. I'm more than okay, I said honestly. I'm happy. And I was. Not the fragile, illusory happiness I'd once mistaken for contentment, but something solid and real and earned through fire. We loaded into the car, all 7 of us squeezed together, loud and chaotic and perfect. As Nicholas pulled into traffic, I caught one final glimpse of Jonathan in the rearview mirror, still standing alone across the street. Then we turned the corner and he disappeared from view, the past fading behind us while the future stretched ahead, bright and uncertain, and ours. Lily's voice rose from the back seat. Can we go to the park after ice cream, please? Benjamin, only if we play soccer. Lucas, I want to swing. Amber leaned forward from the 3rd row. You guys are the loudest family I've ever heard. You're part of this loud family, Yusai reminded her. She grinned. Best decision I ever made. Nicholas reached over and took my hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on my palm. The compass pendant he'd given me 2 years ago rested against my heart, steady and true. Where to? He asked. I looked at our reflection in the windshield, this beautiful, complicated, perfectly imperfect family we'd built from wreckage and hope. Home, I said. We're going home. And this time I knew exactly what that word meant. Looking back at my journey, I realized family betrayal cut deeper than any business loss ever could. Jonathan's lies, my father's secrets, Amber's family revenge, each wound taught me something invaluable. If there's one thing I'd tell you, don't be like I was. Don't build your life on illusions of perfection. Don't ignore red flags because you're afraid of the truth. God gave me 3 profound lessons through this pain. First, he showed me that family revenge only destroys the person seeking it. Amber's anger nearly consumed her until she chose forgiveness. Second, God reminded me that even in family betrayal, he provides people like Nicholas, faithful, patient, unwavering. And third, he taught me that his grace doesn't erase consequences, but it does offer redemption. My father once told me, Legacies aren't built on perfection, they're built on how we respond when we fail. I didn't understand then, now I do. Family revenge feels justified, but it poisons your future. Family betrayal feels fatal, but it can become the foundation for something stronger if you let God's wisdom guide your healing. Don't wait for crisis to examine your relationships. Don't mistake silence for peace or perfection for love. And when betrayal comes, because in this broken world it often does, remember, God sees you, holds you, and offers a path forward that doesn't require bitterness. My personal belief: the truest measure of character isn't how we act when blessed, but how we choose grace when wounded. If this story resonated with you, please comment below, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to stay connected. Your support means everything. Thank you for walking this journey with me to the very end. Please note, upcoming stories may contain fictionalized elements created for educational purposes. If this content doesn't suit you, feel free to explore other options that better fit your preferences.